Welcome to the Deadology Podcast. I'm your host, Howard Weiner, and for this, the 11th episode of the podcast, I have to ask a question. Do you believe in miracles? Today is October 17th, 2023, the 40th anniversary of the Grateful Dead's legendary show in Olympic Center, Lake Placid. Olympic Center is now called Herb Brooks Arena, and that's where I am, sitting in the exact spot where Al Michaels did his legendary broadcast for the game against the Soviet Union. And I'm looking up at the scoreboard. It doesn't say USA 4, USSR 3. There's a picture of Jerry Garcia with the ticket stub from that night, from the 10/17/83 show, as well as a backstage pass. The people here in Lake Placid are great. The hospitality's been incredible. They put this up on the scoreboard to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the show. So upcoming in this episode, I did an interview. Me and Dave talked about Dave from Working Man's Pod. We talked about the show in length. So that's going to be. I'm going to go mostly into the show. I'm going to play that. That was recorded last night in Lake Placid. But I like to start off with a little road to Lake Placid, where comparing the Grateful Dead and the USA hockey team's journey to their big nights. So for the USA hockey team, they got trounced in Madison Square Garden by the Russians prior to the Olympics. It was really impossible to even think they had a shot. But then strange things started happening in Lake Placid. The first game, they almost lost the first game, and it almost knocked them out of contention to Sweden, but they scored like a last-second goal to get a tie, which started the dream. There was no dream yet, but that was the beginning, an amazing last-second goal to keep them alive in the tournament. And then they just trounced Czechoslovakia 7-3. Nobody saw that coming. Most people considered the Czechs the second-best team. So right there, the seeds were planted for the impossible upset, because if they could beat Czechoslovakia 7-3, maybe if everything goes right, they have a shot, an outside shot against the Soviet Union if they could get there. But just this incredible, the wheel was turning, it can't slow down. This incredible momentum, game after game, they were winning, and they made it to that final showdown with the Soviet Union. And when the Russians came onto the ice, it was like they walked into an ambush. If that game were played anywhere else, the Soviet Union would have won easily. But it was just the perfect confluence of events coming together, and everybody in the arena, to some extent, believed that the United States could win that game, which it was impossible to believe that. But if you just look at how psyched the crowd was, there really was a belief that they were going to win against all odds. And everything came into the play, the determination of the coach, the players, and the will of the American public and the fans in Herb Brooks Arena that night made for the most meaningful upset in athletic competition history. And the Grateful Dead road to Lake Placid was a pretty cool one as well. The tour starts in Greensboro, goes to Richmond. By the way, you might hear a few bangs here and there. Maybe a Zamboni machine might come out on the ice. I'm doing a live here in Herb Brooks Arena, which is incredible. A great thrill to be sitting in that spot where Al Michaels did the broadcast. But so they do Greensboro, and then they come to New York City, and they broke out St. Stephen for the first time in 4 years, and it was such a memorable night for anyone who was there. A lot of great versions that night. Jack Straw, Birdsong, just to name a couple, and amazing Throwing Stones after the St. Stephen. Then the next night in Madison Square Garden, they played an all-time masterpiece version of Help Slip Franklin's. I walked to the back of the stage behind the band, which I never do during the show. Usually I'm transfixed on Jerry, on the opposite side of Jerry, so his guitarist turned to me. That was generally my spot. But I went behind the stage, and it was the most incredible thing just to see how the Grateful Dead had Madison Square Garden under their command. And man, did they go into a deep, improvisational, jazzy, dark Slipknot, one of the longest ones, my favorite by far. They had the great explosive bridge into Franklin's. The band was just so on. And then you take a song like Franklin's, excitable, great dance tune, Grateful Dead favorite, Roll Away the Dew. But for a guitarist, it's not an easy song to be creative on because you're basically working with the same jam every time. But on this night, Garcia delivered 6 creative solos, and almost each one was better than the last. Just genius. So that's my all-time favorite help on the way. Slipknot Franklin's, and then the next show in Hartford on October 14th. This one's immortalized in the Dick's Pick series as Volume 6. And man, they played the greatest Scarlet Fire that night. It's, in my opinion, I love that version. Just everything about it. From the opening, it has distinctive licks in the opening, and great outro. Garcia's just noodling away in Segway Paradise Heaven, and great Fire in the Mountain, very methodical, layer by layer, incrementally getting hotter. Just an amazing Fire in the Mountain. So that Scarlet Fire on the heels of the Help Slip Franklin's, 2 of the most important works the Grateful Dead ever did, and the best versions, arguably the best versions, on back-to-back shows in Madison Square Garden and then Hartford. And this all leads to their performance here in Lake Placid. And to say they were excited to play here is, would be an understatement, because the way they came out with that opening Sugaree. Jerry was unbelievable on this night. He was just so excited to be here. 17 minutes, by far the best Sugaree I ever saw, and the only one I ever saw to open a show. This Sugaree compares with the best ones of '77, and I'm going to be going into this with Dave in just a minute. But the last point on the Sugaree, good opening solo. The second solo is one of the greatest I ever heard, and I'm freaking going nuts in the middle of the Olympic Center, jumping up and down, playing air guitar. But then the third solo is coming up, and usually when the Dead played a great second solo, the third solo was like kind of optional. I couldn't even see how they would top or play an instrumental as good as the second one. But on this night, there was no stopping them, man. It was the third solo's every bit as hot as the second solo, and when you put it all together, you got a great Sugaree to open the show and off to the races. But I figured, hey, let me get another voice in on this whole Lake Placid show. So we did a dual interview. Dave does the talk with Alex and Dave, Working Man's Pod. They have a great podcast. Go check them out. We talked about the Lake Placid show and that tour in depth. So without further ado, here is that interview from last night from the Hampton Inn in Lake Placid, New York. And holy cow, I can't believe it. I'm in Lake Placid. Me and Jerry, I'm looking up at that scoreboard. I'm going to post pictures on the internet, but so cool. Jerry Garcia, Grateful Dead ticket on the scoreboard to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the Lake Placid Grateful Dead show.
Lake Placid, and you're there because as we record this on Monday, tomorrow is the 40th anniversary of October 17th, 1983, and just a slamming show, especially a set one that I go back to over and over again. I just want to take a step back a little bit and ask you why when you chose to revisit the Grateful Dead and touring, did you pick fall 1983 as the tour you were going to settle on?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it comes right down to the memorable masterpieces from this tour. Besides, I was at every show except one. There was great tour tales that I could share, but it really came down to the masterpieces and Garcia's playing that tour. So you got the St. Stephen breakout on the 11th. On October 12th, you got the Help Slip Franklin's in Madison Square Garden. I think that's the best one ever. And it's the best one I ever heard for sure. So that's one major masterpiece. When you got an all-time great Help Slip Franklin's, then the next show, Hartford, Scarlet Fire, that's the Dick's Pick 6. And that's definitely a contender for greatest ever in my book for Scarlet Fire. So on back-to-back shows, you're getting 2 of the essential masterpieces. And then the next show at the 15th was good. They played St. Stephen again. And then we get to Lake Placid. And when you get a top-notch Sugaree and deal on the heels of what we had just seen, like all-time great versions, I mean, I go back to this tour and just those 4 versions alone make it the best tour I've ever seen. And then, all the other great stuff they were doing that tour. But when you leave a tour and those songs those versions live with you for 40 years, more so than any other tour, then that was the one I had to go back to.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, I've poked around on a little bit of Fall 83. I did it to prep for, the Lake Acid show and all that stuff. And just the playing night in and night out is exceptional. There's a lot of energy without a lot of, not like, it's not like they're playing fast to get the energy. They're just playing with energy. I think like a
Sure.
lot of times some 80s versions can get like so up tempo it almost hurts. But like Fall 83, they're playing pristine. Like the sugary that opens the show, it's not like they're trying to get through sugary quickly or keep everyone's heart rate up. They just bring this energy is the word that keeps coming back to me. But I mean, they're not playing it fast, but they're just playing it so well. And they wanted to spend some time with it because it opened with a 17-minute sugary. So
Yeah, that's a good observation, definitely. In '82, they were playing really good. It's a lot of great stuff to listen to, but the versions were going pretty quick. They weren't digging into the Scarlet Fires, but they were sounding great. They were singing great. It was tight. Everything was cool. But '83, they took it like that extra step. Garcia's voice might not be as good. There might be some miscommunication. They took more chances for sure, and
okay.
at times it could be a little sloppy. But man, when they hit in '83, they definitely spent the time on the songs. And Garcia had such a great year. I think the best Garcia band tour I saw was also from '83. It was the May tour with the Roseland shows, and so whatever was going on, whatever demons Garcia was going through, he was pouring his heart out into the music. And that 17-minute Sugaree is incredible because, once again, comparing it to '82, I was just listening to Palo Alto, a great show from October of '82. They played October 9th and October 10th. The second night, they did a Sugaree. It was 9 minutes long. So you take a 17-minute Sugaree, you're getting 8 minutes more of Garcia jamming.
Yeah.
So, which would you rather have?
Right.
and and also like just coming into Lake Placid, I think that it's such an effect on the band, especially Jerry. It was like a field of dreams, kind of like with the U.S. With the Olympic hockey team. Imagine the poor Russians coming out, going into that arena with the insane pitch. There was just it was the like Field of Dreams coming out of the corn stalks, except it
Hmm.
was bad. It was a nightmare for the Russians. There was just something so magical about this place. Only the miracle on ice that could only happen in Lake Placid. It couldn't have happened in Madison Square Garden. The Russians would have been too at home playing in New York City, or or it would feel like Paris or Moscow, and they would just demolish like they should. But they
Right.
stepped into Lake Placid, and there's something magical about this place that helped create it. And I think Garcia picked up on that same vibe. It's like you got all the Deadheads, positive energy out there, just pulling in the same direction, and definitely the energy of the crowd of the building played into how great this show was.
I had a question queued up for you. Sorry, my dog's tail is wagging against our moving boxes. Hang on one sec.
I think I got him excited with the with
I
the
had a
Lake
question.
Placid energy.
Yeah, well, I had a question queued up for you about with the Miracle on Ice and how, formative that was for you talk about in your Deadology podcast about just Fall 83. You talk about how you were in high school for that and how like that huge moment was like so formative for you and for, most of the country too. Do you
Yeah, it
think
was
that
a
that my question to you was going to be, did you think that that miraculous aura like influenced the music? And it sounds like it was a resounding yes.
oh for sure, because arguably this is the best show opener the Grateful Dead ever played. If you can
Yeah.
name one, if you can name one that easily defeats it. Usually it takes a song or two to warm up. A lot of times they've come out and done great things. They've done Morning Dew in the early days, opened up the show, but it's never the best version of Morning Dew because it takes a little while to warm up. Songs are usually better towards the end of a set or in the second set, but this Sugaree definitely is a contender for best ever. It's up there with the best of '77, and just to be in that frame of mind Garcia came in like a wild man. It was as if Herb Brooks grabbed him and gave him the speech. If you don't have the best night of your life, you're going to take it with you to the fucking grave. It's
Yeah.
like Garcia just came in with that type, and I mean the whole band was into it, but Jerry went like the extra mile and everything, and you could see it again in the set-ending deal. They played great versions of Deal in Richmond and Worcester from the same tour, but this one's 2 minutes longer. Garcia refused to let the deal go down. So just such great versions on this night. So it definitely impacted. And just to get back to that 1980, back in those days with the Miracle on Ice and watching the Olympics, you were watching channel 247 or your local station. So all of America was focused on this hockey game, like it was the end of the world. This was going to be our revenge against the Soviet Union, who, by the way, were cheating. They were playing professionals against amateurs,
Right.
and so
Yep.
that made it extra beautiful that the amateurs were able to beat them. So and the thing was, the Soviets, they could have beat the best hockey teams in the world in the NHL from anywhere. They didn't need to do it to have that team in the Olympics. Their juniors could have won the Olympics, but so they were cheating, and that was part of the beauty of it, to have our kids who were playing the game right, who had no chance to come in and do it. And just that was such the Grateful Dead never would have played Lake Placid 83 if the U.S. hockey team didn't win that game.
Interesting.
Lake Placid wouldn't be on the map for anything. I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
It would just be another little town in New York that people like to go hiking or something. Or
Right. Yeah. I mean, they did host an Olympics before, but I can't tell you a single thing from the 1932 Olympics.
yeah,
it cements it on the map. And then, like, in sports history, that's going to like go down as, one of, if not the greatest sports upset of all time.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. There's a lot of great upsets, but there were the meaning behind it and everything. And part of the thing that the country willed it, the audience willed it, the players willed it. Like I was saying, if it didn't happen in this place at that time, it was a miracle. It was a whirlwind where it was the greatest upset, but there was a driving force behind it. Like I heard on your podcast last time, you were talking about a 16 upsetting one. It's not like the whole world was behind them and everybody was watching it.
yeah.
This was something where everything was at stake, and the United States so needed this, and
Mhm.
everybody did their part, the fans, and it goes to show when everybody, like when you get a big audience pulling in the right direction, like the Grateful Dead on October 17th, 1983, and all the positive energies out there, incredible things happen.
Yeah. Well, take a step back and walk us through your journey to Lake Placid 40 years ago, and like the pre-show scene. What I love in your podcast, you call it the Deadhead migration pattern. So what was the migration pattern like?
Yeah, I think that's something that emerged over time. Like when I did this with the Grateful Pilgrimage and went back and did the A3 tour, if I felt like a bird doing what I should do, migrating south to Hampton, and actually the first show was Richmond and Greensboro, but it was like you should go to Hampton, another show, then you come back to New York, then you go into the New England area, a couple of shows up there, maybe Philly, but it was like over a 2 week period. That's what spring and fall meant, going on these tours and going south, coming back to New York, going further north. And anyone who toured in the Northeast in those days could relate to that. It's something that I missed. It was so great to go back and do this. It's like something I should be doing, chasing music in the pattern, the way the Grateful Dead laid it out. Hampton, Virginia, Greensboro, all these little places, and you never see these towns. So it was so cool to line them up again, and in honor of the Grateful Dead. But
Yeah.
definitely, it's definitely when you do it a bunch year after year, spring and fall are never the same without doing a Grateful Dead tour and going south and then heading back, taking it north, and then coming back to New York and all that. It was that was our lives, man. And anybody who toured in the '80s, and I think it lost a little bit in the '90s because they started doing the residencies where they would be in the Philly Spectrum 5 nights, the Garden 6 nights, that kind of thing. That took a little bit away from that migration pattern kind of thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, did you drive over from Hartford? Did you like hitch a ride with a buddy? How did you get from Hartford to Lake Placid?
Yeah, that's interesting. I almost after every show, I went home to 91 New York. We didn't have credit cards, and we weren't. It wasn't like these days so easy to go online, find hotels, search everything out, plan out a trip. I stayed at mom and dad's hotel a lot of times. And probably there would be nights I would drive to Philadelphia and then drive back to my house and then go back to Philadelphia the next day. It was 2 hours each way, but as long as we were listening to the Grateful Dead, we didn't care. So Hartford, we went back to my hometown, then went to Lake Placid. And that was one of the things that was cool about going back and revisiting the tour 39 years later was I was actually able to focus on the place. When I was here in Lake Placid, I so wanted to get into the spirit of it all.
Hmm.
But hey, we had just been from Hartford. We probably got lost on the way to Lake Placid. We don't have GPS. We're going off road maps, crumpled up road maps in the front seat, and we're barely making it to the place 2 hours before the show. Then you get there, you got your Deadhead friends, you're talking about all the excitement of the night before. Suddenly you're in Lake Placid, you're jumping up and down, they're playing Sugar-Ree, you're going nuts, and it's hard to really take in. We wanted to take in like the magnificence of being in Lake Placid and the whole 1980 Olympic thing, but it's very tough to do. And then after the show, you got to go get on with your life, go to Portland or whatever's the next stop.
Yeah. Wow. So where were you when you were in the venue? Were you like, because I mean, I've been to the Olympic Center. It's not that large.
Yeah. So like I was center ice where the center ice would be,
Okay.
which is
Yeah.
pretty close with if you can imagine the band set up there. I never like to be too close because I like the little room, which Garcia going with all those licks with Sugar-Ree. I didn't want to knock anybody over. So I usually like a little bit of room, and man, that night I was jumping and dancing. And I think it was more of like training like a boxer, man. More than dancing, I'd be out there playing my air guitar, jumping up and down, and and during the deal, man, that but during that Sugar and deal was insane. But even that whole set, it was a bunch of a lot of energy. The Rooster was good, Friend of the
Yeah.
Devil, and one of the interesting things about that night, and sometimes it's just the way the Grateful Dead they'll play one set one night, different songs the next night. Maybe we're shot all his bullets the past 2 nights. But if you look at Weir's songs versus what Jerry did, I'm not saying it was by choice. It's just what happens as the songs go along. First set, Jerry, Sugar-Ree, Friend of the Devil, Birdsong Deal, Weir, Rooster, Brother Esau, Bucket. So
Yeah.
it's like it was an incredible night for Jerry. Then you go into second set, he's Touch of Grey, which weren't great back then. The song was coming of age. You mentioned that in your podcast. You had a lot of good observations on the music. Touch of Grey, it wasn't a great song back then. It was a new song finding its way.
Yeah.
And then Lay Me Down, Terrapin, great Jerry tunes. They were both. It was the only Lay Me Down of the tour, and the first Terrapin of the tour. And then
Oh,
you got
wow. Okay. Yeah.
and then you got Wheel and going down the road. During the wheel, everybody was just spinning around. Like everybody grabbed hands on the upper deck. And they were spinning around. Everybody. I mean, there wasn't a person who was at the show that night that wasn't transfixed on the wheel, the human wheel going around Lake Placid that night in the upper deck. It was incredible.
That's neat.
And then they did the Revolution encore, and incredibly exciting because it was the second one. And I mean, John Lennon had just been murdered only 2.5 years ago. You also had a good point on that. They didn't play Revolution great. They were kind of like in between tempo on that. They didn't know whether to go quick or go with the slow White Album version. And they were
Right.
missing lyrics. It was a little sloppy, but it was just so exciting to see. But honestly, they were not great versions. But I think the first one at Madison Square Garden really hit the mark, and that was only 5 days earlier.
Yeah.
So
And tell me what it was like. I mean, you're stopping with them every stop of the way. So you heard the bust out, and then, about a week later, you hear it again as the encore. Were there a lot of people doing what you were doing who were like, oh yeah, they just did this last week, or was the vibe kind of more like, oh my God, like a Revolution Beatles cover? What in the world?
yeah, I think it was probably more along those vibes. But in Lake Placid, I'd imagine it's a pretty smart crowd. Like there's not a lot of deadheads who live in Lake Placid because there's only 2,000 people live here.
Yeah,
So it
that's a
was
good
a it
point.
was a
Yeah.
it was a traveling. So I'd imagine most people knew about it or had heard it in Madison Square Garden.
Mm.
But it was incredibly exciting, I believe, in the moment. But at that point, you'd already caught so much that it's just like they kept breaking out great song after great song.
Yeah.
Like and like the second set of that show may not have had the most intense playing, almost by design. That's the way the song it was more song
Yeah.
orientated. It was like a State of the Union kind of like we're in Lake Placid. We're gonna play I Need a Miracle. the wheels turning. You can't slow down. There's a song of momentum, and good loving. And it was a revolution where we were in the world during the Cold War. So I think the song on so many levels really hit home as it was a State of the Union address by the Grateful Dead. Even the Samson and Delilah, the feats of biblical strength, to kind of honor the hockey team as
Oh, look
well.
at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
and that was something I felt in the moment with the Samson. It definitely had the feel of being checked into the hockey boards. It was a very aggressive, version.
Yeah. I think it definitely like kind of pales the touch of gray. Like the touch is a little clunky, and then that Samson is really good and high energy. And
Yeah,
then yeah, I didn't know it was the first Terrapin of the tour that you guys got to see there too. That's really cool to have both those songs, To Lay Me Down and Terrapin. That the
yeah.
pre Drums in Space suite is solid, I think, outside of that touch opener.
Yeah. The and one thing which hurt the show a little bit was Jerry's voice. I mean, his intent was 1,000%. The way he's playing guitar was incredible. His voice was a little ragged, so some of these songs weren't as sweet as they could be if his voice was a little better.
Yeah,
Like
but for then he, as he usually does, he just finds it for that To Lay Me Down. Or maybe it's like
yeah,
because it's a little raspy. It's not really a song I seek out or go to, but that version, I was really loving what he was doing vocally in that song.
yeah. Sometimes that was one of the cool things about Jerry in the '80s. He would find a way to overcome when he wasn't singing strong. He would just with emotion. It would just be emotion pouring through,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's what you hear on the "To Lay Me Down." Where on the Touch of Grey it didn't work out as well, and Terrapin like instrumentally was very solid, but his voice was just he was losing his voice towards the end of the tour.
Okay. Yeah, and you said instrumentally very solid. I thought Bob's playing was like top tier as well. And I like he vocally, I think, was losing it a little too. Like at the end of Hell in a Bucket, his voice is starting to go a little bit. Like you said, he might have been burnt out from the couple nights before in Hartford, but I thought playing wise, like he's rock solid. Jerry obviously is just taking it to the next level. And then do you think it's more like it's been 4 years with Brent? Like there's a certain comfort there that they could really push the limits?
Oh yeah, Brandon. Like I'm glad you mentioned that. And I did notice today when I listened to the Sugaree on the way up. And I did really admire what Weir was doing in the Sugaree. It was obviously Garcia's the stars going off, but I was listening to Weir was like doing some really good stuff during that Sugaree, and it's almost unusual when it really he stood out more in the '70s as playing in the musical landscape sometimes. But yeah, no, I thought he was playing great at this show. And Brent, he just had a way, like during that deal, like he could read what Jerry wanted to do. He understood that Jerry didn't want to end the deal. Like a usual deal would be 8 minutes. So he played like this amazing chord, which was almost like a bridge to extend the jam. I think Brent really kind of understood what Jerry was doing, and they had such a great rapport going back and forth. And I think it was probably almost best that during this period. I love the way Brent would build these bridges because he would kind of encourage Jerry to take it one more level, take it up a
Hmm.
level.
Yeah. And then the drumming too is also just solid.
Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't sound too sneakery at like almost any point in the show. Um, this is one of the, not first, but we don't talk about drums in space a lot on the show because half the shows we cover are like pre drums in space. Like sometimes if we're covering a drums, it's because it's like the intro to the other one in 71 or 72 is labeled as drums. But um had drum space like been fully embraced by you, by the crowd, by the people in Lake Placid?
yeah. It's such like an organic part of what the show was. It's like if you were in the right mood to enjoy it, it was mind boggling. If you needed to take a leak, get a beer, roll up your joint. It was such a beautiful thing because nothing hinged on it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you'd be sitting there and you would just be listening to Garcia noodle away, or the drummers would hit a rhythm. You'd be like, holy shit, this is amazing. But it wasn't something. It was like a perfect feature of a Grateful Dead show. You could jump on. There were people who jumped all over their drums. It was like a highlight to them. and but also is that great break where you could do whatever you needed to do to get back and ready for the post drum space. So it really it was a perfect vehicle. No other band had anything like that going. It was, you're giving everybody their due, you're giving the drummers their chance to shine, and the space, just giving the band a chance to get back into it. And yeah, it was a wonderful feature, even if everyone wasn't great. But today on the way up, when I was taking the drive, I was listening to Space from the Lake Placid show. I'm looking at the peak foliage as I'm driving up the
Mm.
where am I on 87? It was incredible. I was just thinking, too bad I wasn't on acid this night and I wasn't taking the foliage on the way in. I was I think I had some stimulants going through me because I was pounding the ground pretty hard during that sugary and deal. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was amazing stuff. And another thing, you were talking about the Hell in the Bucket, and you mentioned this on your podcast with this Ride Sally Ride. Is that true that there? What was the thing with the woman who was her name was? You mentioned something about
Sa-
the S.
yeah,
Yeah,
Sally Ride is her name. And I have no clue. That's just a theory that I mean, I'm wondering if because I mean, I've been to quite a few Dead and Company shows, and I see how active Bob is in like supporting like women's rights and women's healthcare, and he's all over it on social media too. Actually, I think it's Bob Weir's birthday today, so
oh yeah, it's great. Happy
happy
birthday,
birthday,
Bob.
Bob.
Hey, that
Um,
probably played into the Lake Placid show too. They had a good time the night before, and
yeah,
yeah.
Bob needed a little less songs to to recover. Yeah, that you might be onto something there. But no, that's just a theory that I had that he was like honoring her in a kind of subtle way that he could.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it made sense because I never even thought of that before. But that was around that time period, like 83 or
Yeah, I think it happened earlier in the year, like in the summer,
so
that
then
she
it's
became.
I think it's very likely, because it never occurred to me like I'm pretty good with history, but that's something that either I wasn't on top of in 83. And when you mentioned, I'm like, geez, maybe that's it. And probably is because Bob would often drop in little current events when he's singing Good Love, and he would refer to things that were happening. And also the sport events, they're always very aware of that. He would tip if the Dodgers lost, he would say something, Baby Blue, about the Dodgers. And there was always a current events thing, which Bob was always would bring up often. So when you said that, I'm like, geez, that must have been it, because I always thought it was just a tip of the hat to Mustang Sally and Wilson Pickett. But
Oh,
that's definitely because he goes Ride Sally Ride, or the other chorus of that song. But it makes so much sense. Sally Ride was from
yeah.
that. I was like, wow, right? That was a great pickup. Probably was on his mind.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, that's a product of listening to a show, five or six times and hearing that and being like, hey, that he doesn't usually do that. What gives? And then, I'm doing the research for 1983 and the light bulb clicked, but it all Bob, he could equally be your theory, or it could be some third theory that we don't even know,
Yeah,
or he just got bored and wanted to change it up. Yeah, who knows? But
yeah. I
um,
think he was definitely tipping the hat to Wilson Pickett and also the Sally Ride, because
yeah,
it's so current events. It makes sense.
yeah. Well, happy birthday, Bob, if you're listening, which I doubt you are, but if so,
You
happy.
never know, man. These guys like to jump in anonymously once in a while and hear what's going on. But hey, talking about October 16th and Bob, another show which I got to finish later today, that Amsterdam 81 show, where they did rent it. The story behind that.
I
They did
don't know.
did this one. You got to be all over as far as listening. They canceled some concerts, and I think it was I forget, might have been Paris. They had to cancel some concerts that were outdoors, so they rented equipment, went to the Milkweg in Amsterdam for October 15th and 16th. On the 16th, they played an acoustic set, and then they played electric, and they did Holy Goalie, Gloria. They broke out the first Love Light since Pigpen, and it's all with rented equipment. It's freaking smoking. October 16th, 1981, Amsterdam. So I think Bob was, what was he, like 34 maybe at that time, or yeah. But yeah, a lot of great shows on Bob's birthday. The 89 show with the Brendan Byrne Nightfall of Diamonds release. So yeah, it's another good day for Deadology. October 16th.
Yeah. Hey, there's a idea for you in the future. Birthday shows of band members.
Yeah.
Um,
I think Bob and Billy May 7th has a lot of great shows. Yeah.
yeah. Um, Well, and then, unfortunately the show's over, Revolution wraps up, and what's next for Howard Weiner in 1983? What was
What's
your
next is I missed my only show the tour, Portland. And my friend Doug, who I was with, I dropped him off at Albany that night, and he met up with friends, and he went back to Portland. So he caught all 11. I caught 10 out of 11. So yeah, I don't know what happened. Maybe I just at some point you're low on money. I'm a part-time student, part-time, yeah, part full-time, nothing except Grateful Dead following.
right?
So yeah, it was always nice to go back. My parents were very gracious. I was able to return home and then carry on with this life of this just following the Grateful Dead around, and they always had the fridge was packed with food. So I did miss the Portland show, but then came back for the first Worcester shows after Portland. Portland was a great first set. By the way, if you guys out there want to see what the Dead looked like from this time period, there's a great video of the October 18th show in Portland. Someone took a video from the opposite side of Jerry, and just a very cool video. Great, obviously they dubbed in a great recording. I think that's the real only video from that tour, October 18th. At least the first set, and the first set is great from that night. So after this night in Lake Placid, they managed to come out with great Jack Straw, Love Each Other, Lazy Lightning Supplication. Yeah, a lot of great first set that show. Maybe not as hot as Lake Placid, but probably a more desirable song list. Yeah, so they were great after that. Then they went to Worcester, had two great nights in Worcester, played another killer Scarlet Fire. It was their first time playing Worcester. And then finally they wrapped up in Syracuse the last night. That was the first time the whole tour I felt like a little like it just wasn't a great show. It was a little bit of a downer. They hadn't played Morning Dew all tour. They didn't play Morning Dew. Um, St. Stephen breaking out again would have been cool, but I think they ran out of energy at the last night in Syracuse. But the following year, '84, they played one of their best shows as the last show in Syracuse.
Oh,
So yeah,
little redemption.
definitely there's redemption. And I wasn't there. I was at my brother's bar mitzvah. And I have forgiven him. It was only the greatest Jack Straw they ever played, but I'm dancing
Oh,
around at a bar mitzvah, and and the Grateful Dead are playing the Jack Straw of Dreams. But
oh
yeah,
man.
it's all in a life of following the Grateful Dead.
Yeah. Well, the last question I have teed up for you is actually what you were talking about right before we hit record, because something that you do in your book, which, by the way, if for some reason you don't know Howard's book, The Grateful Pilgrimage is his retread on the 1983 fall tour, where in 2022 he went to every venue and re-listened to the show, like at or near the venue. So my last question for you is, where are you going to listen to the show at or near the Olympic Center?
Oh well, it's a beautiful thing. It's open. The Olympic Center, anybody can walk in there. Any like 7 to 8 o'clock at night. It's open to the public. It's like a public arena. It's an American shrine. So I'm going to do a couple things tomorrow. I always go in there. I listen to it with my headphones on. I have a Bose speaker with me. If I'm not bothering anybody, I might play the Sugaree actually for the whole arena. Not too loud, not like disturbingly loud, but just kind of sit back in a seat and take it in. And then the other thing is part of this podcast, I'm going to be recording inside Herb Brooks Arena. I spoke to the people there. They're going to set a table up for me where Al Michaels did the Olympic hockey broadcast. Do you believe in miracles? So I'm going to be, I guess I'm going to be the Al Michaels for the Grateful Dead 40 years later. And also another cool thing, these people are so nice, man. They asked me if I'd like to put up a picture of Jerry on the scoreboard. So there's going to be a nice picture of Jerry up there on the scoreboard and a Grateful Dead ticket, the backstage pass. I was like, I couldn't believe how nice they were. I just said, hey, I'm this guy who wrote a book, blah, blah, blah. They're rolling out the red carpet for me. And it's part of the magic of Lake Placid. It's a beautiful place. I love coming here, and people are obviously, it's like nowhere in the world.
That's
Field
amazing.
of, field of dreams for fans, musicians, and hockey players.
Yeah, I am envious and jealous and everything in between that you get to sit where Al Michaels sat and bust out a microphone, and that's just incredible. Shout out to the Lake Placid people for not only just letting you do it, but then going way above and beyond to to coordinate that and have you be able to do that.
Crazy.
That's great.
These they're so nice. I figured why not ask? If they said no, it would have been fine. I love you guys
Yeah.
for letting me in here and just being able to. So the doors are being open for me early before the public gets in there. Very very cool. So yeah, just sometimes in life you got to ask if you're if you're inspired about something. You just got to follow your heart and go for it.
Yeah. Well, and that's a perfect way to wrap up because you followed your heart and went for it back in fall 1983 and you did it again last year and you literally wrote the book on the Grateful Dead fall 83 and thank you so much for chatting about Lake Placid. Anything else you want to any other
Yeah,
story to tell or thing to mention or anything like that?
yeah. Two quick things since you mentioned the Grateful Pilgrimage, the book. It's on sale through the end of October. Um, Knocked off $5 on both the paperback and the Kindle. And I just wanted to thank you guys, Alex and Dave, and just from being interviewed by you guys, I was like, podcasting is a cool thing. I hadn't had time to take in podcasting, and then I was like, you guys inspired me to start doing some podcasting, and it's such a nice thing to do. It's easier than writing. I think I'm still going to continue to write books, but it's I found this is much easier to do than trying to keep up with a blog spot and checking word spelling and everything like that. I could just say what I need to say, and it's so much fun. And you guys totally helped me. There would be no Deadology podcast if I hadn't met you guys, so I appreciate that.
Well, we are honored. Thank you so much. I'll speak for Alex here. He's probably honored too. Well, thank you. And yeah, go buy Howard's book. Go buy his older books too. Go buy stuff about Europe 72 and the book Deadology, the Day in Grateful Dead History, and Deadology 2, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Deadology 2. We got Dylan and the Grateful Dead. You might have to take another 20 minutes if we want to list all the books and the titles. But yeah, I think they get the idea. Tangled Up in Tunes or Amazon, you could check it out. There's a whole lot of a couple volumes of my thoughts on the music, and it's meant so much, and it continues to mean that much and more to so many people. So we got to keep doing what we're doing, man. It's worth it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you and take care and enjoy the broadcast booth tomorrow.
Definitely. It's gonna be very exciting and great talking to you again. I'll speak to you guys soon. Peace. Thanks, Dave. All right, we're back live in Herb Brooks Arena, October 17th, 2023. I'm still looking at that great picture of Jerry Garcia on the scoreboard here. And that will wrap up this episode 11 of the Deadology podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening. My next episode, I'm going to start an underrated gem series where I'm going to take two shows which are pretty much overlooked, underrated, shows that probably deserve a little more attention. I got this idea from Bob and Paul. They sent me an email and for the idea, and I thought that was a pretty cool idea to go into some shows that are kind of overlooked. And one's going to be a 71 and one's going to be an 81. And I'll keep that a mystery until episode 12. If pictures of the Lake Placid scoreboard, I'll be posting them all over social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Look up Howard Weiner. You could go to a place like Grateful Dead Tour Veterans 80. I'm going to be posting it there. Should be able to see some of these pictures. They're very cool. And if anybody has any further show suggestions for Deadology, feel free to email me. I got a memorable email address, catfishgarcia82@yahoo.com. Usually, I came up with that email address like 20 years ago before there was a show Catfish. I definitely feel weird giving that email address out to non-Grateful Dead people, but hey, it works. Definitely works for the Grateful Dead. catfishgarcia82@yahoo.com. My website, www.tangledupintunes.com. And through the month of October, my latest book, which goes into the 83 tour, The Grateful Pilgrimage, Time Travel with the Dead, is available on sale. $5 less for the paperback and the Kindle version. Check that out. Once again, thanks for listening. Peace out.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in just a few minutes, so everybody hang loose.